Make sure that you have taken note of the stock width, depth and height. Make a small sketch of this. So Z, X, Y, X, Z, Y, and write up the values. With the X, Y, and Z values annotated, you can make a quick sketch in just the X and Y dimensions to the stock material that we're actually going to cut. Based on dimensions of the router bit we used, these true stock dimension values can be approximated by a little or a large margin. In the case we're using a clearance tool of 16 mm diameter, 8 mm radius, so we can have a tolerance or a margin of perhaps a couple or 3 millimeters. Thus, we can round up this X value to perhaps 456, and we can round up this Y value to perhaps 365. These are the dimensions of the cut that we're going to make with the actual stock. The advantage of this is that the true stock is fully contained within the stock that we're actually going to mill. And also that the tolerance is on the surplus side rather on the deficit side, so that if we cut by an error of 1 millimeter, then it still contains the true stock. For this particular stock, we're going to use 3 sheets of plywood, each glued as a one hole, with a total height, total thickness of all sheets glued of 49.5 millimeters. Which is within our tolerance of 49 mm true stock. If the actual stock would be smaller in height or smaller in thickness than the actual stock, that would mean that the bottom margin surface or the bottom margin would be diminished, and that is something we want to avoid. On the other hand, if the actual stock is slightly larger in the Z dimension than the actual stock, then the only disadvantage is that we're leaving more bottom margin than intended. But that is not necessarily a bad thing. It only means that you're going to have to remove a thicker bottom margin. It is a sound thing to roughly sketch up the intended cut on the material that you're cutting, so as not to make an erroneous cut when doing the actual cutting. So here, 456. And here 365. This is just a rough sketch. Just so you know that you're not making an erroneous cut. And you can repeat this for all 3 sheets in this case. Very good. There are different ways to use the Altendorf to cut your intended stock material, or the individual sheets in this case. I'm going to demonstrate it here, cutting with this as an anhole, making sure that this anhole is in front of the saw blade so as not to be constraining. Alright, having made sure that this says 456 millimeters or so, and that this is positioned here. Then repeat this for all axes. When you have cut all sheets For that X dimension, you can do it with the Y dimension. So here is 365 millimeters. We'll adjust this to 365. Make sure to position this there. Repeat for the other sheets. When all sheets have been cut to the intended dimensions, it is time to glue them together. But since gluing is a time-relative endeavor, we should be fully prepared before actually applying the glue. So one thing that we should prepare or make sure of is that we have lots of glue ready. We will be covering all the sheets, all the surface of the sheets where they glue together. And also that this press here is recommended to use. And to save ourselves time when we have applied the glue and going to press it, we can also adjust the height of this so that it's just a small margin to tighten. One note about this is that this press has two sheets of metal here. It is intended that one sheet is on top of the pressed object and one underneath. They are quite coarse due to glue having been spilling on the surfaces, so it is equally recommended to invest in two sheets of bokpermspapp, and then you can put these sheets of bokpermspapp, one each, one above and one below of the actual object. So we make sure that we have the actual height of the stock, and we see here that it's about 49.5 millimeters, which is 0.5 millimeters larger than the stock height of the toolpath, which means that the bottom margin left will be 0.5 millimeters larger, and this is not a problem. Should the height of the actual stock be smaller than the toolpath stock, that would or could be a problem, since that means that the bottom margin left will be less than intended. So make sure that your actual stock height is the same or more than the stock setup is. Otherwise, you will need to adjust this in Fusion 360 so that the toolpath does not cut closer than 2.5-3 millimeters from the machine bed. So, having taken note that this is about 49.5 millimeters, so with a material that is about 5 centimeters in height, we can adjust the allowance here to be around 4 centimeters larger. That is a sufficient distance, as well as allowing you to work efficiently when you have glued the sheets and insert them here before compressing it. To compress the press, you simply turn this wheel clockwise, and to decompress it, you turn counterclockwise. Make sure to place the bokpermspapp accordingly, like this. And to make things easier later on, we can make sure that the upper layer is a little extended so we can easily grab it. Alright, before actually gluing, also make sure that you have some paper to remove excess glue along the edges, and also to position your sheets so that you can easily stack them after gluing. Let's glue. Cover the whole surface area. Having made sure that all of the surface area is covered, we can position the adjoining sheets onto it. and repeat the process. All right, having made sure that the whole surface area is covered, we can first clean ourselves a little, and then we can position that sheet on it. And make sure that all corners are roughly co-aligned. This middle layer here can be pushed a little. Very good, as well as here. All right. Clean your hands. And position these glued sheets in the press so that the sheets are in the center of the press. You can check where it is positioned from the side here. You see that it's not centered, so we push it inwards. Having done that, we can compress it. Let's make sure that it's centered. Very good, it looks centered. And then we can compress it. So righty-tighty, clockwise here, and just gently descend the press. All right, it is descended. Then we can push a little more. Oh! All right. And then let it rest in the press for at least 30 minutes. And then we can decompress it. When the glued sheets have rested here, compressed in the press for at least half an hour, you can decompress the press. And you do this by turning this in a counterclockwise manner. Having decompressed the press, you can take out your material stock. Now our completed stock is ready for milling.